The sound of paper hitting bone stopped every conversation on the soundstage. Wait, because what happened in the next 45 seconds had nothing to do with the young actor bleeding from a split lip. It had everything to do with a decision Gary Cooper made in 1936, and the 5 words he was about to say would follow him for the rest of his career. October 1954, Warner Brothers, Stage 7. The production was a cavalry picture called Fort Defiance, not the kind of film that wins awards, but the kind that pays bills and keeps 100 crew members employed through winter. They were 11 days into a 24-day shoot, running slightly behind schedule, burning money with every hour that slipped past. The director was a man named Leonard Kessler, 52 years old, silver hair swept back from a high forehead, hands that never stopped moving when he talked. He'd come up through the studio system in the 30s, made his name on tight budgets and tighter schedules, earned a reputation for delivering pictures on time, no matter what it cost the people around him. The young actor's name was Thomas Avery, 25 years old, corn-fed handsome, 3 pictures to his name and a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers that paid him $400 a week, whether he worked or not. He'd been cast as the lieutenant, the officer who dies in the 3rd act so the hero has something to avenge. 19 scenes, maybe 22 minutes of screen time. The kind of role that tests whether a young man has what it takes to carry a picture someday. Notice what was happening before the script hit his chest, because the context changes everything. Avery had been struggling with a scene all morning. Simple setup. The lieutenant receives orders, salutes, turns to address his men. But something in Avery's performance kept missing. His salute was too crisp, too military school perfect. Kessler wanted exhaustion, wanted a man who'd been in the field for 3 weeks and couldn't remember the last time he'd slept in a bed. Again, Kessler called after the 4th take, and this time, try to look like you've actually seen combat instead of a recruiting poster. Avery nodded, reset his position, tried again. The salute came up. Still too clean, still too eager. Cut. Kessler's voice had dropped half an octave. What exactly am I paying you for? The crew had gone quiet. Grips found sudden interest in their equipment. The script supervisor studied her notes like they contained sacred text. Everyone knew the signs. Everyone had seen Kessler build toward something before. Gary Cooper was sitting in a canvas chair near the edge of the set, reading through his pages for the afternoon's coverage. He was 53 years old, 2 Academy Awards behind him, a face that had become synonymous with a certain kind of American decency. He'd been in pictures for almost 30 years. He'd seen directors lose their tempers before. He'd learned, mostly, to stay out of it. But he looked up when Kessler's voice changed, and he kept watching. Listen to how the next 2 minutes unfolded, because this is where a career gets decided. Kessler walked onto the set. He moved the way men move when they've stopped thinking about consequences, shoulders forward, chin down, each step carrying the weight of accumulated frustration. He had a rolled script in his right hand. He always carried a rolled script. It was part of his image, part of how he conducted himself on set. Avery stood at attention, trying to hold character, even as his director approached. His eyes were uncertain, but his posture hadn't broken. That small courage would cost him. Do you know what this scene is about? Kessler stopped 3 feet away. Sir, the lieutenant is receiving orders to... I didn't ask what happens in the scene. I asked what it's about. Avery's mouth opened, closed. He didn't have an answer that would satisfy, and he knew it. It's about a man who knows he's going to die. Kessler's voice was quiet now, almost gentle, which was somehow worse than shouting. It's about looking at a piece of paper that tells you to take your men into a canyon where half of them won't come out. and you're playing it like you're accepting a tennis trophy. I can try it differently if you just tell me what I've been telling you for 4 takes. Kessler raised the rolled script. Maybe this will help you understand. He drove it forward into Avery's chest, but the young actor had been leaning slightly forward, trying to hear, and the impact caught him off balance. He stumbled back, his boot caught on a sandbag, and he went down hard. The corner of a wooden crate caught his mouth on the way down. When Avery looked up, there was blood on his lip. Not much. Just a thin line of red that he touched with his fingers and then stared at like he couldn't understand where it had come from. 47 crew members saw it happen. Nobody moved. Remember this moment, because what came next would define how Hollywood talked about Gary Cooper for the rest of his life. Cooper set down his script pages. He didn't stand up immediately. He took a breath first, slow and deliberate, like a man making sure of something before he committed to it. Then he rose from his canvas chair and walked onto the set. He didn't walk fast. Cooper never walked fast. But there was something in his movement that made people step aside without being asked, that created a path through the frozen crew members like water parting around a stone. Kessler had turned away from Avery, was already calling for makeup to fix whatever damage had been done, was treating the whole thing like an inconvenience rather than an injury. He didn't see Cooper coming until the tall man was already past him, already kneeling in the dust next to Thomas Avery. Cooper pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, white cotton, monogrammed, the kind of thing a man of his generation always carried. He pressed it gently against Avery's split lip. "Hold that there," he said quietly. "Pressure stops the bleeding." Avery's eyes were wet, but he hadn't let the tears fall. His voice came out shaky. "Mr. Cooper, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Nothing to be sorry for." Cooper's voice was calm, unhurried, like they had all the time in the world. "You're doing fine. Bleeding's almost stopped already." He helped Avery to his feet. The young actor was unsteady, still shaken, but Cooper's hand on his arm was solid as oak. That's when Kessler finally spoke. "Coop, I appreciate the concern, but we're on a schedule. The boy's fine. Let's get him to makeup and try this again." Cooper turned, and here's what everyone who was there remembers about that moment: the way his eyes changed. Gary Cooper had the palest blue eyes in Hollywood, eyes that could convey warmth and humor and quiet strength. But when he looked at Leonard Kessler, those eyes went flat, cold, like looking at lake ice in January. "The boy," Cooper said, and his voice was still gentle, still that familiar drawl, "is bleeding because you hit him." "I didn't hit him. He fell." "He fell because you struck him with that script. Everyone here saw it." Kessler's face flushed. "Now wait just a minute. I'm not finished." Cooper took one step closer to the director, just one step, but it closed the distance between them to something uncomfortable. "You can run your set however you want. You can yell, you can demand, you can push people until they break. That's your choice. But you're not going to put your hands on anyone while I'm standing here." "Put my hands on—" Kessler laughed, sharp and incredulous. "It was a rolled-up script, for Christ's sake. The kid needs to toughen up if he's going to—" "The kid," Cooper said, "is a professional doing his job, same as everyone else on this stage, same as you, same as me." He turned back to Avery, who was still holding the bloody handkerchief against his lip. Cooper reached out and straightened the young man's collar, which had gotten twisted in the fall. A small gesture, almost fatherly. Then Gary Cooper said 5 words that Thomas Avery would remember for the rest of his life. "Take all the time you need." Wait, because if you don't understand what those words meant in that moment, you won't understand why this story traveled through Hollywood like wildfire. Notice what Cooper was really saying, not just "take your time with this scene," not just "don't let Kessler rush you." He was saying, "You belong here. Your pace matters. Your process is valid." In an industry that chewed up young actors and spit them out, where contract players were treated as replaceable inventory, Gary Cooper had just publicly declared that Thomas Avery was a human being worthy of patience. And he'd done it without raising his voice, without making threats, without any of the dramatics that other stars might have employed. He simply stated a truth and let it stand. Kessler stood there, script still in his hand, face cycling through emotions, anger, embarrassment, calculation. He couldn't challenge Cooper directly. Cooper was the star. Cooper was the reason Warner Brothers had greenlit this picture. Cooper was, frankly, one of the few actors in Hollywood who could get a director fired with a single phone call to Jack Warner. But more than that, and this is what everyone on the set understood, Cooper was right. And being right in that moment carried more weight than being powerful. "Take 15, Kessler said finally, his voice tight. "Everyone back in 15 minutes. The crew dispersed slowly, reluctantly, not wanting to miss whatever might happen next. But Cooper wasn't interested in whatever might happen next. He guided Avery toward the edge of the set, toward his own dressing room, one hand steady on the young man's shoulder. Listen to what happened behind that closed door, because this is where the real lesson lived. Cooper sat Avery down on the small sofa, poured him a glass of water, checked the cut on his lip. "It's not deep. Won't need stitches. You'll have a fat lip for a few days, that's all." Avery was still trembling slightly. "I've been working on that scene for a week. I just couldn't find what he wanted, and now you've learned something about Kessler that's going to help you." Cooper pulled up a chair, sat down across from the young man. "You've learned that his anger isn't about you. It's about him. It's about whatever's eating him up inside that he can't control. You just happened to be standing in front of him when it came out. But he's right. I couldn't get the scene." "You couldn't get the scene yet." Cooper emphasized the last word. "There's a difference. I've been making pictures since before you were born, and I still have scenes that take me 10, 12, 15 takes to find. That's not failure. That's the work." Avery looked at him, really looked, like he was trying to understand something. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Cooper?" "Just Coop. Everyone calls me Coop." "Did anyone ever, when you were starting out, did anyone ever help you the way you just helped me?" Cooper was quiet for a long moment. His eyes went to the window, to the afternoon light filtering through the dusty glass, to memories that lived somewhere beyond this room. 1936, he said finally. Picture called The Plainsman, Cecil B. DeMille directing. Biggest production I'd ever been part of. And there was a scene, a death scene actually, where I couldn't find the emotion DeMille wanted. Take after take, and I could see him getting frustrated. I thought he was going to replace me. He paused, and something in his expression softened. Instead, he cleared the set, sent everyone away except me and the camera operator, and he walked over to me, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Gary, stop trying to die the way you think I want you to die. Die the way you would die. Find your own truth." Cooper looked back at Avery. "That's what I learned that day. That's what I'm trying to tell you now. The scene Kessler wants, the exhausted lieutenant who knows he's riding to his death. You can't find it by trying to give him what he's asking for. You have to find it in yourself. Find a moment when you knew something was ending, a relationship, a hope, a version of yourself you had to let go of. That's the exhaustion he's looking for. Not physical tiredness, soul tiredness." Avery was listening with his whole body, leaning forward, the bloody handkerchief forgotten in his hand. "When we go back out there," Cooper continued, "I want you to forget about Kessler. Forget about the schedule and the budget and what everyone expects. Just think about something you've lost, something you couldn't hold on to no matter how hard you tried. Let that live in your eyes when you salute. Let the camera see a man who's already saying goodbye to himself. He stood up, walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. And Thomas, if Kessler raises his voice to you again, you come find me. Understood? They walked back to the set together 15 minutes later. The crew watched them come, watched Cooper position himself just off camera, where Avery could see him, watched the young actor take his mark with something different in his posture. Kessler said nothing, called for quiet, called for cameras. Action! Thomas Avery received his orders, read them, and when he looked up to salute, there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Exhaustion, yes, but something else too. The grief of a man who has already begun to mourn himself. Cut. Kessler's voice was quiet. Print it. The crew exhaled. Someone started to clap but thought better of it. And Gary Cooper, standing in the shadows, allowed himself a single small nod that only Avery saw. But wait, because the story doesn't end on that soundstage. The story of what happened on stage 7 traveled through Hollywood the way all good stories travel, passed from grip to grip, actor to actor, set to set, until it became something larger than itself. Gary Cooper stood up for a contract player that Kessler was beating on. Cooper told Kessler to his face that he wasn't going to hit anyone. You know what he said to the kid? Take all the time you need. 5 words. That's it. The details shifted as the story moved. In some versions, Cooper had threatened to quit the picture. In others, he'd actually thrown a punch. In still others, Jack Warner himself had intervened. Stories do that. They grow and change, shed some truths, and accumulate others. But the core remained. Gary Cooper had used his power to protect someone who had none, and he'd done it quietly, without grandstanding, without making himself the hero of his own intervention. He'd simply done what was right and then stepped back into the shadows. That became the foundation of what people meant when they talked about Cooper's silent courage. Not the performances, though those were remarkable. Not the awards, though those were deserved. The way he carried himself when no one important was watching. The way he treated the least powerful person in any room. Here's what happened to the people in this story, because endings are what give beginnings their meaning. Thomas Avery finished the picture. His performance as the doomed lieutenant was, by most accounts, the best work in the film, a small miracle in a forgettable picture. He went on to work steadily for the next 20 years, never becoming a star, but never disappearing either. Character parts, supporting roles, the kind of career that lets a man raise a family and pay his mortgage and feel like he's doing work that matters. In 1978, a film historian tracked Avery down for an oral history project about the studio system. Avery was 69 years old, long retired, living in a small house in Pasadena with a garden he tended every morning. When the interviewer asked about Gary Cooper, Avery went quiet for a long time. That day on stage 7, he said finally, I was ready to quit. Not just the picture, the business. I thought I'd made a mistake choosing this life. And then Coop knelt down next to me, pressed his handkerchief against my bloody lip, and told me to take all the time I needed. His voice caught. He didn't have to do that. He was Gary Cooper. He could have stayed in his chair, read his pages, waited for them to sort it out. Nobody would have blamed him. But he got up. He walked over. He chose to see me when everyone else was looking away. Avery wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I never got to thank him properly. He died in '61. I always meant to write him a letter, tell him what that day meant. But you keep putting things off, thinking you have time, and then suddenly you don't. That's the lesson I learned too late. Tell people what they mean to you while you can. Leonard Kessler directed 4 more pictures after Fort. Defiance. His reputation for difficult behavior caught up with him by the end of the decade. The studios stopped calling, and he spent his final years teaching at a small film school in Arizona. He died in 1971. His obituary didn't mention the incident on Stage 7. Gary Cooper won his second Academy Award the year before Fort Defiance for High Noon, a film about a man who stands alone because standing alone is the right thing to do. A film that might have been written specifically for him. When he accepted that Oscar, he was characteristically brief, thanked the Academy, thanked the director, thanked his family, didn't give a speech about courage or integrity or what it meant to protect the vulnerable. He didn't have to. Everyone who knew him already understood. Look at what this story really means when you strip away the Hollywood mythology. A young actor was being humiliated. A powerful man could have minded his own business, could have told himself it wasn't his fight, could have stayed comfortable in his canvas chair. Instead, he chose 5 words that cost him nothing but meant everything. Take all the time you need. That's what silent courage looks like in practice. Not dramatic confrontations, not righteous speeches, just the willingness to treat people with dignity when dignity is in short supply. Just the simple act of seeing someone when everyone else has looked away. Gary Cooper understood something that Hollywood often forgets. That character isn't what you do when people are watching. Character is what you do when you could easily do nothing at all. Some legacies are measured in box office receipts and award statues. Cooper's was measured in the young actors who never forgot him, the small kindnesses that never made the papers, the moments when he chose humanity over convenience, and that, in the end, might be the only legacy worth leaving behind. If you enjoyed spending this time here, I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing. A simple like also helps more than you'd think. This is a dramatized story inspired by real people and events. Specific dialogue, scenes, and side characters are creative reconstruction for storytelling purposes.